I think it's important not to look for perfection, but to look for speed, momentum, and achieving results that we need to drive by 2030. And then as we go and let's say finish that potential, then we can look at doing something more perfect.
Hi people, welcome to another episode of the Sustainability Circle podcast. I am Max, co-founder of TSC, and I am your host today. Every 2 weeks, we bring you insights, success stories, and practical advice from top sustainability leaders driving sustainability in organizations around the world. And today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Sorouch Kheradmand, Global Head of Sustainability at Schneider Electric. Sorouch has been a key leader in integrating sustainability into business strategy, turning it into a competitive advantage at Schneider. And this is exactly what we are going to be talking about today, because together we want to take a look beyond compliance and discuss how sustainability can be leveraged as a competitive advantage. Sorouch, happy to have you on the show.
Great to be here, Max.
As usual, I'd like to start by exploring a bit your background and what led you to where you are today, because I know that as you also are a leader in sustainability within the Sustainability Circle, our community, that you transitioned to sustainability during Corona, actually. So I think in 2020, which is not that long ago. Can you walk us through your career path and what led you to where you are today as a global head of sustainability?
Sure, I'm happy to do so. And again, thanks for having me. My career started originally in the energy space. And I was an R&D engineer, and then I went into business. Okay, and I was actually quite passionate about business. So I started my career off in Japan, actually, where I worked for 10 years for a couple of companies, joined Schneider, did sales, strategy, M&A, and then I ended up also leading a large sales team within Schneider Electric. What was, as you said, when COVID happened, I think many of us had an introspective moment, and I didn't escape it. And what I would say is, long story short, when I was driving a sales organization, it was really high pace. It was a job I loved. It was really about achieving results and so on. So many things that resonated with me. But I had that feeling of something missing. And I remember when I would see my quarterly results, even though those results would be super good, I was like, okay, it's awesome, but so what? Okay, what's next? Is it really something you can sustain and highly motivate yourself in the long run? And I felt there was something off. At the same time, I've always been interested in sustainability, and that's why I started in the energy space. And I always had that small voice in me telling me that, climate change is important, but it's not a business topic. You cannot make it a business topic, right? And plus, it's a deep expertise. You need really to know the in and outs, etc. It's like, pivoting to AI. It's super hard, which actually, if you already know, some people are pivoting to AI even though they know nothing. So I like to take that analogy. And when COVID happened, actually, I also just learned my wife was pregnant with our first son. And, you have all those things coming all of a sudden. So you have some, let's say, preconception of the possibility of a career transition, which I thought was not possible. You have what you feel in the alignment you feel at work. You have a space to reflect much more, travel less, and so on with COVID. And we were lucky actually overall, I think we were blessed to be in Singapore, where we had quite a safe environment, which was not necessarily the case for everyone, but we had that space to think. And I was about to be a dad. And what happened is I just started, some soul searching and really trying to dig into the topic. And I remember a couple of discussions that were really, let's say, life-changing in a sense. The first one was attending an IPCC conference. So we had like a bunch of researchers, actually French researchers, but like that, I think you have researchers from all over the world, and they were dropping by Singapore, and they gave that view of what climate change is. And, you have that pendulum where you see that climate can recover, the climate system can recover until 2 degrees. Above 2 degrees, it's a system collapse. And basically nobody can predict where climate will go because of several factors and so on. And they show the models. And then they spend 10 minutes asking you not to panic, giving you, ways to manage the fear factor. And that stood with me saying, hey, if I have a child now, and if I see a need to do something, and imagine, I turn out in my 60s, 70s, and, I finish my days on this, in this life, what would I have been proud of? What would have made me feel that, well, I've done something meaningful in my time here, something that I also love doing, and something that I could tell to my son that would be, hey, I did what I could. I did my part. Okay. And whatever that part is, I actually did what I could. And this just triggered, you ask yourself questions, you dig for more answers, so on and so forth. And I actually went on a networking frenzy. And for those of you who maybe have me on LinkedIn, you see I post about how I do that networking. And I went to contact a lot of people, scientists, business leaders, and so on, to really understand, why is the business world going so much, passively about sustainability? I mean, of course, there are commitments and stuff like that, but versus the emergency, you see, they're kind of dragging their feet. And what I found out is that, long story short, business people are driven by financial returns, stakeholder and shareholder engagement. And today, three things. Sustainability is perceived as a complicated topic. And it is to some extent, but you can simplify it, but it's perceived as being complicated. If it's complicated, people mystify it. Just like you can mystify AI. Can you do machine learning? Oh my God, you don't even start to look. You assume it's so complicated, you don't want to go there. Same thing with sustainability, carbon, biodiversity, and so on. The second piece is that there is not, let's say, money to be made with this. So you're going to invest into some people who are going to see it, do carbon footprinting and whatnot. You're going to lose money. Do you decrease your cost? Do you increase your turnover? No. I mean, that's what most, business leaders tell me. Say, I need to invest in that. It's going to tank my P&L, blah, 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 blah. And the third thing is that I think that passivity overall in businesses make it that they don't see an opportunity to actually generate business, differentiate themselves using sustainability. And all of that slows down that journey. So that was my personal conception. And I would say I've been, I think in the sustainability space more than anywhere else, you have many people who are willing to share, give, and it's a space where there is much less competition than, a traditional business. And I want to highlight that. And I hope that this message that I give will help some people to just want to go there and think seriously about their transition if they want to do it. And I'll be happy to support any of those who will contact me. So that journey really started, let's say, from research for purpose. And by researching that purpose and speaking to more and more people, I found an issue that also resonated with what I know, what I can do. And from there, it was very easy for me to position myself, because ESG is a very big topic. You can talk about, social governance, environment. That's literally what ESG is. Within even environment, you have water usage, waste management, carbon, of course, and so on. And for me, it was really, hey, how can we help businesses actually want to go there? How can we change the dynamic from, hey, oh my God, I need to do something about it, versus, hey, there is an opportunity, I can make money of it. And we accelerate the trend towards sustainability. So it's a super long answer, but I hope it answered the question.
No, thank you very much for that introduction. And I think I can definitely relate to the urge to do something. This is what ultimately also led me to start the Sustainability Circle, because I am of the same opinion. Sustainability doesn't need to be complicated, and it is definitely, when done right, a competitive advantage for the company. And this is why I have been very much looking forward to this episode today, because you actually put out a quite bold thesis, which is that the role of chief sustainability officers, as we know them, should disappear. Let's maybe make the transition here. Can you explain what you mean by this and why you believe the role of CSOs needs to evolve and maybe disappear?
So also, if it can help the audience and those who want to transition, that article got me a job. Okay. And actually, because I was coming with that view of where I can contribute, and then once you're positioned clearly on an issue, people can associate you easily. And that article was a starting point for me to do my transition efficiently in the industry. So the reason for that article actually came from all those interviews that I had been doing beforehand, as I mentioned. And the point was, as I described, ESG today is a topic that is mystified, etc., not really taken by business leaders. And the thing that you see is that in many companies, actually a vast majority of companies, they have a chief sustainability officer, but that person is really looking into, let's say, the footprint of the company, what the company is doing and how to reduce that footprint and how to meet, let's say, climate goals and so on, which are very commendable and very important things to do. But not once, or let's say not once, I'm exaggerating, but in very few cases, do you see them really being in an integral part of the competitive analysis, of the competitive strategy, of the business strategy of the company. And I felt that this was just such a shame. Because again, using the parallel between sustainability and AI, in the same with AI, you can use AI for everything and anything. If you use it to, draw pictures of cats, good for you, but I mean, you're quite unlikely to do business with it. However, if you use it for some specific use cases, some, let's say where you solve customer issues and so on, not saying that you cannot do money with pictures of cat, but if you take a business-minded approach, actually, this is where you start to solve customer issues. You start to solve also your own issues. You drive efficiency, you drive differentiation. And, with that, actually, you can create value. And the moment you create value, be it for customers, be it for your company, the discussion completely switches. It's not about just doing what is right for the planet. It's about doing what's right for the company, doing what's right for the customers, doing what's right for the employees, doing what's right for the stakeholders, shareholders, and so on and so forth. And you start genuinely stopping about talking just about sustainability. You talk about creating value, creating resilience, creating an environment that is better for the company to thrive on, to be future ready. And you just conveniently put the discussion in a space that every CEO is eager to take, every CEO is convenient going into, because they can finally reconcile both worlds. And that's a point I really want to highlight. I think that today sustainability, as actually particularly during COVID, there's been a lot of advertisement, I would say consciousness taken on sustainability. But the general discourse is still very much on there is an emergency, it's the fault of your business, and so on. All of those are true. But the question is, how do you help people who can do something, to want to do something, do so happily, and put all their minds and energy into making this happen? And that's why, and for me, my audience is those business owners of large or smaller companies. And I invite everyone to think about their own audience. And I think by doing so, I'm not saying we don't need also, the fact that there is an emergency. This is super needed for awareness. But then the question is, how do we bring those who can do something to actually do something?
Now, I am sure that almost all of our listeners and fellow sustainability leaders believe that sustainability can be a key driver of competitive advantage, right? And I think in the general market perception, we also see that trend for being that sustainability leaders move from compliance-driven to or through risk mitigation, then to leveraging sustainability as a competitive advantage. But now let's get a bit actionable, right? How can sustainability leaders, in your opinion, make the case for integrating sustainability as a strategic advantage? And maybe also what practical steps can they take to achieve this within their organization? What are the initial steps, for example, for an organization to take this shift?
And actually, you're a great podcast host because you really know how to frame the questions. And secondly, you'll see that the answer is actually easier than it might look. And it's about the way you frame things and you prioritize them. I would say I'm coming from the B2B manufacturing sector. I've explored 10 different industries to validate that thesis of, CSOs, what they could do, etc. In every case, if you put your mind to it and you think through and you surround you with the right teams, I think there is a case to be made. And that case might not cover the whole spectrum of the change that needs to be made, but it's a strong accelerator for the first 40, 50% to go. Okay. So, and here I think it's important not to look for perfection, but to look for speed, momentum, and achieving results that we need to drive by 2030. And then as we go and we've, let's say, finished that potential, then we can look at doing something more perfect. But that's my personal philosophy. Okay. And everyone can have their own. Now, your question being, what is it that sustainability leaders can do to look at sustainability and some, applicable steps? As you said, I think sustainability today is driven by a bunch of factors that are directly associated to sustainability and some that are not exclusively associated to sustainability or climate change. On one hand, if I give a few examples, you have regulations coming. You mentioned compliance. And I think, CSRD is coming into force. You have the same happening in Australia. Singapore will have its similar rule next year and so on. So businesses will need to do some reporting. And businesses will need to show that, they're aware of their footprint and so on. And honestly, we had the elections in the US. Businesses that want to continue that in the US because they do business with Europe or other parts of the world will continue doing that. Even if they, disengage officially from some stuff in the background, they're doing it. You have also cases of emergent countries which we don't expect to do things like, Vietnam, Thailand, who are asking their businesses to be compliant with CSRD. So that trend is there. It might slow down because of some election. It might pause, but it's going to happen. Okay. And when you look at whether it's fortunate or unfortunate, at the dynamic of climate change, it's not going to stop. It's going to happen. And someone who's a business guy and who's a bit savvy understands it if he looks beyond, 3 years to satisfy its shareholders. The second piece, once you've introduced compliance, brings to risk mitigation, be it carbon prices, but being also, raw material costs, supply chains, ability to, access to your supplies. Luxury brands are looking at, biodiversity as a huge risk because they cannot get access or they cannot raise, the animals they will take the leather from for their goods and whatnot, etc. Same for the agricultural sector and so on. Climate change is going to bring risks. Your supply chains are going to be put at risks. Your customers are going to be put at risk also. So, and risk can be ESG, non-ESG. And it's something any business leader should look at. So from there, what is it that you're looking as part of your company strategy to anticipate those risks, identify them, and mitigate them as much as you can? And that's not a sustainability question, that's a business question. Okay, it's linked to climate change, but it's a business question. Finally, your customers are going to have those risks. Your customers are going to have issues. They will need to comply. They will need to assess risk and mitigate them. They will need to decarbonize or address their customers better. Hey, we're talking business, right? What is it that you can do to help your customers be more efficient, be differentiated, blah, blah. And this is where you start turning, and that's, I think, the reality of every business, a challenge into actually a business opportunity. Okay? And so that's, let's say, the overall framework. And I hope I made sense and I didn't make it too boring and long. But from there, how do you make it? And I would say, there isn't a single way to do it. Okay. However, I think that, and I think I listened to some previous podcasts, what everyone agrees is start understanding where you are at. Okay. And whoever you're looking at, start understanding where they are at. And I will give a few examples. I use a very simple framework in my mind. So there is the compliance, risk mitigation, competitive advantage framework. I have another one, which is basically product systems, ecosystems. And I try to look at that to see, how you can address things. And I think when you look at a portfolio of products, usually you can start just having a life cycle analysis of your portfolio. And just by looking at the data of, let's say, the footprint of your products, you can have some ideas of stuff to address, right? In Schneider, we're a big manufacturer of electrical equipment, the leading one, if not the leader. I think we are the leader, actually. And we use a lot of aluminum. We use a lot of copper. Okay. We extract that copper. We refine it. We shape it to fit our products and so on. That has quite a significant footprint. Okay. So if you look at that data and you start basically identifying what are the big items to look at, it's kind of like purchasing, people look at the list of what they buy, they go for the biggest where they pay the most to then go to the smaller pieces. Just by doing that, you can get a framework and look at what you want to do. And you'll see that you have some low-hanging fruits, which are really easy to basically pitch. Like in our case, we're able now, we just came with a new product, which is using 40% less copper, less aluminium, that can use recycled aluminium. And basically that works better than the product that was from the past generation. And all of that was driven by some LC analysis. And it's easy to sell internally. It's easy to sell externally because it's just better, right? Everyone is happy with that. And we didn't look at that before because we just didn't have, the whole HCA and the thought process there. The second piece is, how is that product going to work within a system, and how can you also, improve a system? If we talk about the example of Schneider here again, I have different examples, but sticking to Schneider, we sell a lot into buildings. Okay. We are the ones basically doing the whole electrical, plumbing, mechanical pieces of a building. How your HVAC is going to work, how do you make sure you have lighting, making sure that you have the electricity in a reliable way, and so on. Now again, do that same LCA, but rather than doing it on the product, do it on the building, on the system itself. How does the building behave? You'll happen to see that 70% of the footprint of a building is across its use phase, not the construction, right? Maybe there is something to dig into. What is it linked to? Well, lots of buildings are using fossil fuels and so on, blah, 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 blah. They are just letting the lights on, etc., etc. And from there, you can see that, well, if you're able to help buildings first remove fossil fuel from their sources of energy and be more efficient in the way they are operated, you can reduce the carbon footprint of a building by 20-25%. And at the same time, reduce their energy bill by the same amount. What I'm trying to tell is that starting with the data, looking at cases, focusing the cases on what you're actually trying to do, be it the customer, being actually the product, and looking at it and playing with it is the best way to generate ideas. And people in the room, people who've been working on these, are very well positioned to basically bring something else on the table. And I've never seen someone pushing back a topic on sustainability. It's a topic that is very cohesive, that really brings, let's say, positive energies. And if you give them the space to do so, you can generate a lot of bottom-up, if I may say, innovation that you can bring into your roadmaps and bring there. So I hope those two examples kind of give a gist of what could be done. And I'm happy to bring more if needed.
Yeah. I'm also a very big advocate of bringing and embedding sustainability into the business strategy, right? Because it's often seen as a cost center, as something separate to the business. And also the approach that you are suggesting here is actually making sustainability a revenue securing, if not a revenue generating function. And when you can accomplish that, then everybody in the business will listen to you because you speak their language. And this is also how you embed sustainability at the core of the business strategy. And I love the two examples that you gave, because I think this is where also a lot of people can relate to. Everybody has buildings, and then also everybody is producing goods. I just read the other day that, for example, Porsche, as we have been speaking also on risks and risk mitigation, had an accident in their supply chain where the aluminium manufacturer actually got flooded. And I'm not remembering the numbers correctly, or at least not precisely, but basically because of that, last year they could manufacture 10,000 cars less. This means 2% less revenue. And this means at the day where this went public, they actually had a slight crash of their share. So, if we continue to give sustainability not the level of attention that it actually needs in the business, we will see more and more of those climate catastrophes happening. And then more and more businesses will actually face those risks. So I love that approach of looking at the products on the services and then embedding it from there. And from your experience, maybe, what are some of the challenges that other sustainability leaders might face when trying to embed sustainability into their business strategy? And how could they maybe overcome them? Let's talk a bit about arguments, about strategies, and how to go about those challenges.
I think that in sustainability, there is there is something that is called the curse of knowledge. I think people in the ESG space know a lot. And people who are not in the ESG space don't know that stuff. And I've had debates with people where I was trying to explain them the scopes, how it works and so on. And they simply, don't understand it. And I think it's something we need to be mindful when we navigate with. Okay. And, showing, or let's say using that jargon and that expertise and so on needs to be done mindfully, because the objective in the end is to get buy-in and to drive the change. Okay. In Sustainability, we tend to, let's say, actually, I think you have a lot of companies want to have really deep experts on topic who might lack the understanding of business strategy, understanding the customers, the portfolio and so on, but are really experts in CSRD and so on. And that's a trend I'm seeing in some companies. And I think it's a dangerous trend because it's commoditizing sustainability and it's really bringing it apart from the core of the business. And at the same time, you have other companies who are really putting business leaders, people who understand customers' portfolio and so on, and having them backed up by those experts so that they can really drive a business transformation. And I personally believe that's the better way to do. Okay. From my end, I'm coming from commercial marketing and strategy. So for me, it's been very natural, let's say, bringing arguments that can get the buy-in from executives or decision makers, shareholders, and so on. And that's the language I naturally speak. Okay. And in that language, the two things that you need to understand is, one, what is it that you're helping the company achieve to be better in the future? Better not only with one metric, but better overall, right? Be it on its financials, on its reputation, on its employee engagement, on its margins, etc., including also sustainability, of course. And the second piece is, what are the things? I was told by a mentor that basically strategizing is about resource management. Where is it that you need to invest? And why should it be there? A company cannot achieve everything. What are the few things that bring the most value and are the closest to the operational model of a company so that the chances of success are maximized? Because you can have an awesome strategy to go to the moon, but if you've never made it before, high chances of failure, not worth the investment, right? So going after those low-hanging fruits, which have the biggest impact, business-wise, climate-wise, financially, okay? And really selling the case this way so that you say, hey, like with those, the chances, the returns are high, the chances of missing are low. And this is where we should go. Okay. And I think for me, that's the best way to bring forward, let's say, to get the buy-in from decision makers, business decision makers, shareholders into, let's say, investing and moving down that road.
And also you as a sustainability leader are not alone, right? So you have other peers in revenue generating functions that can definitely help you. And when you put yourself into the shoes of them, into the shoe of the sales head or even the marketing head, then you can find a common language, you can find the arguments. And this is what I hear at least a lot in the peer group sessions that we are doing with the execs, that as soon as you actually speak the language of the CFO, for example, you will find the right arguments to actually get budget for your sustainability initiatives.
Exactly. It's like facing your customers. Speak the language of your customers so that you build that bond and that trust. It should not be a job that is in its own ivory tower with a bunch of expertise that is not understood. Your role as a transformative leader, as a leader of change, is to actually get as many people to do their part and to want to do their part and to have something they get from doing that part above the satisfaction of doing what's right for the planet, but also doing what's right for their careers, for the business, for the company, so on and so forth. And that's not the easiest job in the world. But I don't think we come into that space because it's easy. We come into that space because we believe we need to do something and we feel passionate about it.
Yeah, and there are always quick wins that you can actually get and therefore then get traction and then also gain confidence and trust among your peers in the company. That is definitely true. Maybe for sustainability leaders who face this challenge right now, right? They want to pivot from being a cost center to basically value-driven, and they want to convince their business executives. What are some effective ways to communicate sustainability as a driver for long-term value and not just a cost center? Is there something that you could highlight here?
I would say you look at which part of the P&L you're helping get better. Are you helping sell more? Are you helping increasing margins? Are you helping reducing sales costs, travel costs, manufacturing costs, supply costs? What is the issue that you're helping solving? And you don't need to do everything. Actually, each one of these can be one project on its own. Sit with the persons that own their own piece of P&L and look at how you can help them drive that better. If you look at revenues, what are, let's say, again, the issues of your customers? How can you help differentiate and sell better by embedding sustainability as a value proposition? And believe me, more and more companies are looking into that. More and more companies need to reduce their footprint, so they're doing better, get their employees, those privileges and so on. If you look at profits, how can you build that differentiation, increase pricing power, go for new type of products and services that can generate more value for the company and the shareholders, and that are close to the operating model of the company? If you look at costs or cost of supply, you look at your manufacturers. If you, for instance, again, we use a lot of aluminum and copper in our manufacturing. When we see a risk in the supply of copper and aluminum, demand is going to keep increasing. I think demand is expected to rise 3 to 4-fold. It's from a report from McKinsey that I read that, while supply is expected to increase by only 50%. What does it mean? Prices are going to explode. Okay. Coming back again to the risk piece. So for you, if you want to look for other opportunities to mitigate that risk, well, here what we're doing at Schneider is we're looking at the circular economy, right? And looking at circular, which came as an answer to what we want to do. Of course, there is also green materials and so on. Looking at circular, this is a way for you to secure supply, but also reduce cost of supply in the future once this is built on. And all of that builds a case in its own. Then, of course, you have much lower hanging fruits, like, electrifying your operations or your fleet, reducing travels, reducing the temperature of your facilities, or the improving processes that you reduce costs, save energy, and so on. Long story short, when you look at manufacturing and let's say operations, we believe that energy efficiency in itself, and here we have the core of our expertise, is one of the lowest hanging fruits. Okay, electrification and energy efficiency to start, and from there you can look at other vectors and ways to bring efficiencies, which decrease your operating costs, and by doing that you also improve the balance sheet. But it can be the P&L, but it can also be other pieces that are not directly recognized in the P&L. You can talk also about employee engagement. I'm getting hammered by people who want to join Schneider because we're the most sustainable company, and all of them mention that it's because Schneider is the most sustainable company. Sustainability is not only a differentiator in your P&L, right? It's also a way to, in your branding, in your employee engagement, in your customer satisfaction, and so on. And those are not factors to be, let's say, dismissed, and they can be measured also in other means than pure P&L. I could go on for hours, but I'm not full of time. So let me know, but happy to have follow-up questions.
Well, that's amazing, actually. That's a great angle. I mean, we always talk about competitive advantage, and then most of the people think about revenue, right? Like, how can we actually get more revenue? How can we actually secure ourselves and basically differentiate against our competitors? And one big part of that is actually getting the best talent, right? And how do you get the best talent? I mean, a lot of people, a lot of well-educated people are actually very much into sustainability. And that's a great insight that you as Schneider did a great job there. And this is why a lot of people are applying, and you can choose and select the best talent from all of them. That's amazing. Thanks for sharing that insight. Maybe because we are also already very much ahead in the interview, maybe running out of time, because we always promise that those are quick action-packed sessions. I think it has been one of the most action-packed and insightful sessions so far. Let's maybe have one more question in regards to what potential does sustainability has to or for the innovation of products, of services, of business models? You just touched a bit on that with the circular economy. Can you provide an example of how sustainability has been used to innovate within product, services, or business models? And how do companies like Schneider Electric incorporate sustainability into their offerings, right? To differentiate themselves also in the marketplace. You touched on that briefly for the circular economy. Maybe one or two more examples in regards to how you do that to innovate.
Yes. So Schneider is one of the most advanced companies when you look at integrating sustainability as a key value proposition. And I think that where we really accelerated was when we gave the tools and the guidelines to the different pieces of the business, being R&D, supply chain, manufacturing, but also, let's say, sales and so on, to, let's say, get an understanding of the topic. So it doesn't mean that every employee needs to know everything, but we put champions where need be. We will basically start getting that data-driven approach, understand what needs to be done, understand also customer issues and so on, and see how we can embed sustainability as part of the traditional processes of Schneider. If I give an example, if you look at product design, for instance, whenever we define a new product, you have a process that mentions that you need to have a product that brings something more, including driven and related to sustainability versus the previous generation. And that value needs to be tangible, needs to be measurable, and needs to be related to what the customer needs. So, for instance, what we are doing, you know that Schneider is one of the leading companies in providing electrical distribution equipment to data centers, for instance, and much more than electrical distribution. We also provide the racks and so on, and monitoring systems. What we do actually is we develop products that are able to, when you have, in data centers, you have redundancies to avoid, let's say, a data center to fail if one piece fails. So you have what we call a single failure criteria to avoid this from happening. So when you have redundant products, how do you make sure you can minimize as much as possible their consumption? For instance, that's one example. How do you ensure that you remove plastic as much as possible from products? How do you ensure that if you have metals, they come from a renewable source? Okay. Renewable, it's not renewable as per se, it's like remanufactured and so on. And those processes basically, rather than having a CSO having to look at everything, which I think is the worst way to manage change, you basically bring that culture across the organization so that you can generate that bottom-up innovation. And that's not a walk in the park. Huh? It takes, let's say, it's a journey, it's transformative, but it's the way that works. Same thing when you go to customer-facing or, let's say, sales. You'll very often see that the CSO of a company is also starting to be a decision maker to some extent, or if not a decision maker, an influencer. Okay. And if you're able to help both the CFO and the CSO agree together on, what should be the project that they should go after, this is where you also start to change the way you also sell your portfolio. And I encourage everyone to look at, their portfolio. I think that we tend to dismiss that there are sustainability value propositions already existing in many products already out there in the market. Okay. When you talk about, for instance, building management and so on, building management systems are here to help a building behave better. Okay. If you tweak those designs to make also the building bring and measure also the impact on carbon, energy usage, and so on, it's an incremental bit that you can basically, let's say, add to the product and gives it a sustainability value proposition on top of what it already has. So sustainability is not necessarily completely disruptive. Okay. It's stepwise. Okay. Now, if you talk about circularity, this one has been one of the most challenging and most interesting projects I've been involved in, because circularity really involves, just like sustainability, many different things. It's about getting the products back, remanufacturing them, repairing them, and then, selling them back, making sure that it has the same longevity as a new product and so on. And actually what you might see is that when you talk about circularity, same thing, we tend to overcomplexify things. You have a lot of companies that do circularity, for instance, in emerging markets. They take old products, they give it a couple of checks, they put it back. It's circular, right? So we tend to think of things like, being super, brand new and so on, while actually many existing examples in your industry or in adjacent industry exist, which you can inspire yourself from. And then it's about identifying also what makes sense for the company. If you go for a circular business that customers don't want, that are going to tank your profits, nobody's going to follow you. So really going into, let's say, finding the few cases that are the most salient business-wise with high customer need or acceptation. And here you can come back to regulations, risk mitigation, and what you help customers achieve can help you start the journey. And as you go, this is much more disruptive and it's much more in the change management, heavy change management process. Get that spearhead winning case and train the teams on the operating model and on the right thinking to develop a new business that can then be invested on regularly without going too fast either, or else, you just crash, okay, and you lose your money. So I think you really have both views, right? You can be highly disruptive, test, pilot, and then expand, you spearhead and then you expand. And at the same time, you can go really wide, large, but a bit more shallow, where you just, incrementally improve what you have by driving that bottom-up innovation, which is already, what teams are actually willing to do from what I see. Do I make sense?
Definitely. I mean, to sum it up, there are unlimited options, I think, to make the first steps, get your first quick wins, right? So that you then also gain traction among the organization, see sustainability a bit as a partner to all of the other departments, because there you have a lot of the expertise and people willing to actually make great choices for their products and services. And you as the sustainability leader or the sustainability manager can just pair with them and then see where you can actually have the biggest quick wins. And then the opportunities are actually endless. That's amazing.
If I can highlight on what you just said, I think the role of the Chief Sustainability Officer is really to bring that, let's say, direction, bring that vision of where the business is to be and what are, let's say, the targets we want to achieve collectively. On top of that, it's really about bringing that expertise on, whatever this be around sustainability, but bringing that core expertise and making sure that the expertise can either serve to drive some breakthrough projects or be infused within the organization, but not infused and let go, but infused with the right governance, with the right processes and the right oversight, so that you really see that change sinking in within the decision makers, within the leaders, wherever they are in the operation, so that they can really take up on those tools and bring them. And I would say, I think whichever job it is, you've won at your job when you're no longer needed, because you've basically done what you can and it's already part of the company culture. And I would like to emphasize culture because I think it's also a very important thing. And this means that it's also another role from the CSO is to build that culture together with the executives, to make sure that the message really comes across so that sustainability is meant to be a priority and a priority that we are going to drive in a way that is also helping the company. Okay. And once you give those messages, I mean, we've seen tremendous positive energy and willingness to make the ball move forward. I don't think I've met anyone pushing back a sustainability topic because it's a sustainability topic, right? But like usually you find that it's rather, let's say, the business outcomes that are either the make it or break it decision factor.
Yeah, 100% agree. It has a lot of parallelities with the digital transformation, right? That has been starting 30 years ago and for some of the companies is still ongoing. I think right now this is the sustainable transformation, and every transformation is a huge change management process. As you said, it goes on and on and on, and the role of the sustainability leader is to be that change maker, to really guide that transformation. And that's maybe right now full circle to the last question and also the thesis that we put up at the beginning of this interview. You said the role of chief sustainability officers in your article that everybody should actually read. You can find it in Sorouch's LinkedIn featured section. So give it a read, please. It's very informative. But you said that the role of the chief sustainability officer should disappear. Now, I think it will take some time, but let's have the last question right now for today's interview. How do you see the role of sustainability leaders evolve in the next 5 to 10 years? And what changes do you think are coming for sustainability leaders, and how should they prepare for these, let's call it a shift in the role?
I think you have a few shifts coming on the way. The first two shifts, which are not at all related to sustainability officers, is one, the rise of regulations. And you have regulations on carbon, soon biodiversity, water usage. And actually, with that, you also have resources prices and so on, which are systemic risks to company and the economy that are driven by climate change. So those changes are going to happen, and chief sustainability officers, just like the CEO, have a role to work on the mitigation, but also on the resilience of a company in that new future. Okay. My natural thesis is that chief sustainability officers today mostly look at carbon, social also. Soon they will need to also expand their range of, if I may say, expertise, also to biodiversity, water usage, which they're already doing, but I would say it's coming by waves. Okay. And I think last year, the big topic was carbon. I think in 2 years, 1 year is going to be biodiversity. Then it's going to be water usage and so on. And all those needs, that expertise, that expert up topic is going to come as we see, more, if I may say, disturbances in the global economy related to those different points, right? And the regulatory drivers behind that. As a chief of sustainability officers, I'm saying you have, I believe that the role should be merged together with corporate strategy, right? And corporate strategy and whatever is in there, be it, company business strategy, shareholder relationships, and so on, is going to take sustainability just as one driver and cascading down with the business with like anything else. For me, strategy is the brain of the CEO. It's where we set the targets, where we decide of a path forward, and again, use the best options to go in that path forward and allocate resources accordingly. Now, there is a chance also, and I see that happening, unfortunately, that with regulations also coming into force more and more strongly, sustainability is going to be commoditized into rather being a reporting, let's say, a function where we look more at, say, are we checking the box of reporting and compliance? Are we checking the boxes of, what we are asked to do? And that's actually something that worries me a bit, and I think would kind of not only slow down the transformation, because I don't think reporting is what drives transformation uniquely, but also, in a sense, keep silo the topic versus the core of the business. So I don't know which one it's going to be. I think you have a healthy amount that are going in the, merging strategy, business, and something together. And there are more and more, let's say, maturity into seeing the potential of it. But you also see with CSRD and those regulations actually coming that this has also, let's say, a bit of that effect on some decision-making characteristics. But in a nutshell, really enlarging the spectrum of expertise, and driving it together with strategy, explaining to the company how it can impact and benefit the company in its future.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights. That has been an amazing episode, and I think this is a very good ending. Sorouch, I have to say, thanks so much once again. It was a true pleasure to have you on the show and learn from all of your insights and the amazing job that you're also doing at Schneider Electric. And to everyone who's listening in, thank you again for tuning in. See you next time at the TSC podcast. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Max. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.